Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live stream. Welcome to our podcast.
Hey Donna, how are you doing?
Hi, Victor. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Let's
Another
wait
day in Boston, right?
another day in Boston. We'll wait a few more seconds
Yeah,
just to make sure everyone that wants to get on gets on.
yeah, correct. And it's so exciting to be talking about what we're going to be talking about today.
I
I'll let you
agree. I
kind of
think
like let the surprise out. That's not so much of a surprise, but definitely something that is really interesting to talk about.
super interesting. I agree, Victor. Um, Okay, let's get started. So, hello everybody. Welcome to Approaching Your Future with your host Dana Khan and Victor Ribeiro.
Yes,
Today we have a surprising topic for you guys. We'll be discussing Boston's public transportation.
that's
So,
correct.
everywhere from Mbta to cars to ferries and buses, just how to get around Boston. And this podcast is going to be a good resource for international students that are living here in Boston right now. We think that it's a good place to get yourself familiarized with Boston's culture in general, and especially with this podcast, how to get around Boston.
Yeah, very true. And I think that, in addition to all that, I think it's always good that we're bringing this international perspective because we didn't really grow up in the city. So for us, I guess everybody that moves into a different country, when you're first adapting to that place, you always go through a certain type of transition, and that's where you get your first impressions, right? So it's interesting because our first impressions can actually be really helpful and relatable to other people that are in a place that we once were, right? So it'll be really exciting. I'm happy to be here.
Exactly. No, me too, V. And I think that it's interesting because we come into this culture, this American culture transportation that is very different to the one we grew up with. I think that in every country, public transportation functions in different ways. But I personally, in Latin America and the countries I've lived, didn't really use public transportation. It wasn't like extremely habilitated for everyone. It was harder to access, I think. And it's very interesting to see how America is based on public transportation. Everyone moves through the subway, everyone moves through the train, through Amtrak, and it was super interesting to adapt to. Well, how was your experience with public transportation back home, V?
Yeah, interesting because it's exactly like you said, right? When we come to America, I think a lot of times, depending on where you come from, right? Because let's keep in mind we both come from South America. I'm from Brazil, and that's where I grew up for most of my life, right? And when you come to America and you get to know the different things that goes on here, not just culturally, but how the environment is, how things are managed, how the public transportation is managed, it's super interesting. But I think that above all this, there are a lot of things that students should know in terms of public transportation to navigate well and to actually, not just get what they want to get, but kind of like be safe and learn some curious facts about how it really is.
I agree. I completely agree. So let's start talking about the MBTA. So the MBTA is Boston's public transportation, usually a subway. Um, and MBTA actually stands for Massachusetts Bay Transport Authority. That's why it's called MBTA. Um, a fun fact about the MBTA, it's that it is where American public transportation began. In fact, this subway system was the first subway system in North America. It started in Tremont Street, if I'm not mistaken. It started in Tremont Street,
Yeah.
and it linked to what is now Government Center in Boylston Street. So it is super cool to know that we are here in Boston are traveling the roads that so many people traveled for years, right?
Yes. And also, like you said, there's Tremont Street. And if you go to Park Street nowadays, which is located near the downtown area, you can actually see a lot of like illustrations and signs of this history of Boston as well as the transportation and how it was built. Because as we all know, Boston it's not just a highly cultural city, but Boston is also really historical. So there are a lot of interesting things that happened along the way as this public transportation system was implemented into the city. And there are actually a lot of like interesting things that I'll be bringing up later on that I'm not even sure if you know, Danica. Like it's really interesting, like how when people actually started building the Green Line, which is one of the oldest public transportation lines in United States. When they were building that, actually they had to move a lot of interesting things out of the ground that are related to history.
Really
Yeah, but we can talk about that whenever we get to the Green Line. But it's super
awesome. Okay.
interesting. Yeah.
That's so cool. I really love that. I think that first of all, I'm gonna show you guys the map of the MBTA. I think that I mean I haven't lived in other places in the US, but I personally think the MBTA is pretty efficient. You know, it tends to have bad it tends to have bad one second.
Like a
It
bad
has
reputation
bad
or
reputation because of yeah, because it's slower, right?
yeah.
And which we understand, but at the same time, it's pretty safe as opposed to other like public transportations. As if we compare it to New York, New
Yeah.
York is a fast transportation. It's quick. It gets you anywhere in New York,
Yeah.
but it is not known to be very safe. You know,
Yeah.
it's known yeah, as a like if you're a young student, a young student studying in the U.S., it's something that you need to be a bit more careful with.
That's
Um,
true.
so
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
I think that like a good way to put it too could be that how New York is efficiency over quality, right? And in Boston, it's not necessarily quality over efficiency, but we do have more quality in terms of the different lines because we have the green line, we have the red line, we have the blue line, we have the orange line, and each different line, of course, was implemented at a different time, and each one will be newer or older. And it's a I think it's a pretty big contrast, right? But let's see the map that you're talking about now. All right, cool.
Yes. Can you see it?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's zoom in here, guys, for a bit. Basically, oh wow, it doesn't let me zoom in. That's okay. So here you can see all the lines. In the MBTA, it has the red line, the orange line, the green line, the blue line, and the silver line. The silver line tends to be an extra route. It tends to be a bus. It's still considered one of the lines of rapid transit, but it still is a separate line. So let's talk a bit about culture with these lines. The green line usually tends to be the line that college students take. So if you're studying around Boston University, Northeastern, at Emerson College in downtown, or Suffolk in downtown, you tend to take the Green Line to school depending on where you're living,
Yeah.
because the Green Line has different lines within. It's the biggest line and also the oldest line. And it has Heath Street, which is, for example, the one I take to get home, because my stop is at the Prudential Center, so it's right here. I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse, but it's right there, right? After that, there's Boston College, which is the line me and Victor take to get to Approach.
Every day.
It's every day, exactly. It's a line that takes you all the way from Lechmere, which is here on the other side of Boston. It's across the financial district, into what tends to be Somerville and Davis Square and other areas of Boston that are not necessarily considered part of the city of Boston. So they go all the way from here, and they take you through Government Center, downtown, Park Street, and Boylston, which is where the Commons is, where the Public Garden is, into different routes. So if you go into BC, you go from that and you pass through all of Boston University, and then continue up to Boston College, which it usually is pretty far from Boston. So these lines are massive, they're huge. That's what we need to understand. And why do they take so long? Why do they take so long? Well, they take so long because it's filled up with college students that need to get to their classes in every stop. That's
Yeah.
why the BC line tends to be very slow.
Oh my gosh.
And me and Victor tend to be there for hours until we're able to get off.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, have you ever taken the any other line in the Green Line, V?
Well, I feel like, so I've been living in Boston for 7 to 8 years already. I like to believe that I know very well every single line because I'll be very honest with you, Dana. Like I've been to most of the last stops of each line, including the red line and green line, because well, red line and green line especially, they have kind of like a division at a certain point. So the green
Right.
line has kind of like four divisions, and they classify as B, C, D, and H, if I'm not wrong. And I know that the
B,
red
C, D, and E.
B, C, D, and E is. Thank you so much, Nana. B,
Yeah.
C, D, and E. And the red line actually also does something similar, but it's more to Braintree or Ashmont. I've been to Braintree, I've been to Mattapan, which comes after Braintree. I've been to Ashmont, and I've been to a few of the last stops in the Green Line. And I've always liked to see a bit of the differences too, because you don't only get to different areas of the city. Of course, you see different types of people, but as you get down the Green Line, you see more of a suburban side of Boston. So it's definitely very interesting. And when you talk about that, like how slow it is sometimes, I would say the one that we have the most issues being slow is usually the Green Line, right? Because
Yeah,
they're trolleys. They're not necessarily subways are faster, but the trolleys usually they go pretty slow because they're going in the outdoors. So that's something
that is true.
interesting that should definitely, like, people should definitely know. And that's why in the winter, when you go in the Green Line, and if you're going to Boston University, it can be a little challenging because of the snow. And these trolleys on the Green Line are outdoors, so if there is snow on the way, a lot of times they have to clean up the snow and other things, right? So those are definitely things that were pretty interesting for me. But I like to think I'm pretty knowledgeable in this public transportation thing in Boston. Although this map looks pretty complex, it's not that hard to navigate for me.
It really isn't. No, I agree, V. Like, it really isn't. I came from like a background that I didn't really ride a lot of public transport back home, and when I came here, I was like terrified, right? Because like if you come from abroad and there's not a culture of riding public transportation wherever you're from, and you get here and that there's a big culture, you're like, what is this map? How do I get to where I need to go? I don't understand anything. So it
Yeah,
was it was a quick learning experience, to be honest. I think that the Boston transportation is pretty self-explanatory, and as you say, there is a different purposes, like the red line. It takes you to Cambridge, and for those who are abroad or are new international students, Cambridge holds MIT, holds Harvard, and it tends to have a lot of the big biotech companies and just technology companies and healthcare. Some healthcare industries are there, pharmaceuticals. So when you ride the red line, it tends to be faster, definitely. But the culture within the red line is definitely like it skews to an older population, usually people that work in those fields and people that are going to school and at those universities. So it's interesting to see, maybe like Boston makes it easier because of the demand for those type of jobs in Boston and within the industry, right?
Yes,
So
that's
yeah,
correct. But like when you mention how the red line is so present in Harvard, you're right. It's also good to mention how the red line, the only line right now that can really take you until the end of Cambridge, kind of like where you can go
exactly.
to Harvard as well as MIT, but also different areas that
Yeah,
will be close
Davis
to different
Square.
colleges. Yeah.
Agreed, agreed. So, like for example, if you go up to Davis Square, it's really close to Tufts. So that's where you get like into Somerville, and you get pretty close to Tufts University. And actually, like I spent both me and Victor have spent quite some time in Davis Square, and there's a lot of the buildings are owned by Tufts. Like when you walk around, so it's super cool to see like you go into like different worlds every time you make a stop in the red line because it's a whole different university or different industry, and it's very interesting to see. um, but apart from that, as opposed to the green line tends to be college students and people that work around Back Bay, right? So but usually college students, it really is filled
Yeah.
up with a younger population all the way from until midnight, until it stops at midnight.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
so, and it also has the green line also tends to be really full and exceptionally slow when there's games, when there's baseball games, because it stops at the Fenway station, and from Fenway, people go onto the Fenway Stadium and watch the game and then come back home through the green line. And that's specifically, those days are the days when it is impossible to get home, right, V?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like, when the line stops at Fenway, it's more specifically Canmore, right? Which is
Right.
also not too far from Boston University. Consequently, not too far from Approach. Just making you guys know that like Boston University and Approach are really, really close. So if you are going to a Red Sox game, you can actually go from Approach straight to the Red Sox game, depending
Straight.
on
That
what
is
time
true.
the game is and depending on what time you finish your classes if you're on campus. But that's very, very true. And it's interesting because like you do get to see a lot of the appreciation for sports that Boston is known for when at days like that, right?
That is completely true. I'm going to show you guys a bit of pictures. So here's a red line. This is the updated red line, right? So they updated a lot of the cards recently, a couple years ago, I think. The red line seems to usually be really pretty, it looks very like new and
Yeah.
innovative in that sense. I
Yeah.
actually find it super comfortable to ride in. I tend to
Mhm.
ride. I used to ride the red line a lot, as opposed to the green line, which, as Victor said, it's a trolley. It looks like this.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
it's a
And it's outdoors, right? True.
and it's outdoors, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really pretty. You get a really cool view, but it tends to be slower. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, when you say that the red line is newer, I think that the red and orange line are getting renewed now.
Yes, that is
Yeah,
true.
there are new trains for these lines, but the older trains can be pretty beat up, like we say. They can be pretty old, but now it's pretty mixed. So you will see a diversity of those.
Exactly. Um, and apart from that, the orange line usually takes you, and I'm gonna show you guys here back on the map. It takes you into through downtown crossing towards Oak Grove, right? So the orange line is the line where you use if you want to change into the blue line that goes all the way to the airport, and it goes through the beaches of Boston. So the fastest way to get to the beach would be through the blue line. So wherever you are, you go into the blue line and go all the way to Revere Beach, and then you hop off at that station and you're straight in the beach. Um, that one's pretty nice. I love the view in this blue line. I think it's super efficient. And the other reason why it's important to have the blue line in mind is because it can take you to the airport. So I've personally ridden the blue line all the way to the airport. It's very simple. It stops at the airport and then you take a shuttle to your gate. But it is the one line that genuinely takes you to the airport, apart from the silver line, which is a separate bus.
Yeah, but and another thing, if I'm not wrong, I think they named the blue line because it goes under the water, and
Oh
also,
yes, yes.
yeah, it
Wow,
goes
V.
under the water and also goes on the coast of the city, right? So
Right,
if you're going to the beach side of Boston, at least the most accessible beaches will be accessed through the blue line rather than any other line, right?
right. And that's super cool to know. Do you know why I think it goes underwater? I think it's because it also goes like through the. It also might be because it goes through the aquarium.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know that when you're going from Boston downtown, more specifically, and you're going to the sides where the blue line goes, which is Chelsea and Revere Beach. Actually, the last stop of the blue line is called Wonderland, and it's
True.
really yeah, it's really interesting because when I was an exchange student here and I was going to high school, there were a lot of times that. I would tell my host family, if they would be like, "Are you coming back from school?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm on my way to Wonderland," because that's actually the last stop of the Blue Line, and it's really interesting that they named it Wonderland. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's really new too. It's really new. But when you're going from Boston downtown to go to that side, I don't think they have bridges for the Blue Line, so that could be one of the explanations on why they did it under the water. In addition to a few other things that could be related to the whole infrastructure of the city, you know?
Exactly. No, exactly. So that is the blue line. And the last line we need actually we've touched on all lines. So the orange line tends to go through downtown crossing. The population tends to be a bit different. The downtown crossing station specific, it's known to have a bit of like a lot of like the homeless people in Boston, which tends to be a bit of a problem in Boston, but it is in all of the United States. I'm not gonna lie. But in downtown crossing around those stations, you need to be usually a bit more careful, in the sense of what you're carrying and what time you're going on the T and who you're with. So just to keep an eye out around that station. But also, it's good to know that in the downtown crossing station is the Charlie Card store. So the Charlie Card is a card buy when you get here in Boston, and this card can basically you can reload it with money, and you can just tap it anytime you go into the subway. It's a pretty easy. It's a much easier thing to do than buying your ticket every time you go on. If you're a person that are gonna genuinely use the subway, the card itself is free. You can just
Yeah.
add your money. But
Hmm.
just so that you guys understand, so a one-way ticket in the subway costs around 2.40, so
Hmm.
$2.40,
Yeah, in the
and
subway,
then
right? Like
in
green
this
line, red line,
exactly
orange line.
on the subway. And then so if you buy it like a two-way, like the one that goes
Round trip.
one way round trip, exactly, sorry, round trip, it's around $5. If you make the math, it would actually be easier if you buy some form of link pass. There's a monthly
Yeah,
link pass that is around
yeah,
$90. It tends to be
yeah.
cheaper for college students if you can get it through your school.
Hmm.
um and it is a pretty easy way. So, for example, I have my Charlie card. I tend to upload some money on it every 2 weeks or so. I put in like $20 or so and make sure that I have enough money to write. So,
Yeah,
and why is this important too? Because if you're writing on the green line doesn't have stops to buy your tickets. Around, it depends on which line, but around BC, for example, the one that me and Victor write to get to approach, it doesn't have stands to buy tickets because it is an outdoor station. So it is important to always get your Charlie card whenever you can. It's the best way to access everything. So I'm gonna show you guys a bit more here. Here you can see this is a larger map of the MBTA,
Yeah.
and you can see other type of transit. So there's like the rails, the railroad
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah, which is something that we can even mention a little bit more. But like for students, the commuter rail, which is the purple line, is not really for commuters because this takes you out of the city, right? It goes to the suburbs. It goes to the farther end of Massachusetts, like Western
Right,
Mass, or even I think the commuter rail can also get you to Maine, but I think that's something that needs to be double checked.
right. Right. So
Yeah.
if you're a commuter coming in from outside of Boston into the city of Boston, buying a ticket for the commuter rail is a good way to go. The commuter rail is pretty sturdy and it takes you all the way out of the city into back of the city. So I have never really ridden the commuter rail. V, have you ridden the commuter rail?
Yeah, I have, and it's comfortable. It's really nice. It's not too expensive. Gets you wherever you want to be in time. But yeah, I have. I have actually. I went to Burlington a few times. I went to Western Mass a few times in the commuter rail. If you're going to, for example, UMass Amherst, which is known as like it's a big party school here, or they call the zoo. You would definitely be getting a commuter rail for that too. But yeah,
Yes, yes. No, yeah, that the commuter rail, that seems like a good thing to know for college students.
yeah.
But here you can see a few more pictures. This is the green line going through Boston University, which is
Hmm.
exactly the route we take. Um, and you can see how it has absolutely no stops where to buy your ticket. So definitely carry a Charlie card with you or a
Hmm.
few dollars, because that will work out. And
Yeah,
here you can
that's
see the
inside of the green
inside.
like Yeah.
Exactly. So there you can see how it's different to the red line. The red line is much more um like sophisticated. It has like a bit of a more sophisticated aesthetic, right, V? Um
Hmm.
but it's definitely comfortable, it's sturdy, it takes you where you need to go. Here you can
Yeah.
see the inside of the old red line. So some
Yeah.
of the trains are newer, some of the trains are older. This is the old red line. Um it has this aesthetic
Hmm.
here in the seats. That's
Yeah.
it's actually a 70s
Yeah.
aesthetic from
Yeah.
Italy.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure
Um
it's from the 70s, 80s, right? Like a lot of those
yeah,
trains.
I did a project for that for one of the classes that we had of design. I forgot the name right now. Oh, it's Memphis Design Aesthetic. That's what it's called. Memphis Design
Very
Aesthetic.
cool.
It's a Italian aesthetic from the 70s. And it's super interesting to see it here in Boston, right? That's how
Yeah.
the world works. It just
That's so cool.
translates information
Oh, look,
everywhere.
that's so cute. Like the Boston MBTA stickers. That's
That's
very,
so
very
cute.
known. Yeah, that's so nice.
Super cute. I would love to have one of these. Super cute. And here you can see the making of them.
Yeah, so this is the making actually of the newest lines that have been added. Like we
Ooh,
mentioned before, the red line and orange line actually made a huge deal to renew their lines. So these pictures were going around for a while in 2019, 2020 to show people that the MBTA has been working on making the services more comfortable.
better,
Yeah,
right?
better,
So
exactly. You can see
here's the
inside.
updated. Yeah,
Yeah,
here's the updated. This is how they've become.
yeah.
They look super clean, super
Yeah.
new. And here,
Less comfortable too, but it's good.
that is true. It is it does look a bit less comfortable. But it's cool. And then here you can see where you buy tickets. Here's where you buy your MBTA ticket, and there's always people there to help you. Also, it's good to know that you can upload money into your Charlie card on those stands too. You can do it both online through the website, and you can also do it right here. You just tap your Charlie card on that black box right here,
Hmm.
next to the stand, and then you can upload as much money as you want, which is great.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's the cool part. Remember how we talked about that the MBTA does everything that's like the commuter related part, which is like the commuter rail takes you outside of the city. But the MBTA is not only limited to railroads. They actually do water transportation, um, and they have these boats. That some of them are known as ferries, and they can take you from the side of Chelsea to downtown, and they can actually help you get to the airport a little easier. But I've never really used them personally.
Exactly. Yeah, I've never used them either. They're pretty cheap actually. The Charlestown Ferry one way is 370 and the other way around. So Higham Hull Ferry one way is 975. Um so if you want to get to Charlestown, if you want to get to Hingham, you're welcome to take the ferry. It's probably a
Hmm.
beautiful view, not gonna lie.
Yeah,
Um and very affordable transportation,
for
which
sure.
is cool to see. And here you can see that the entrance, that's how you get
Mhm.
on.
Yeah, and on the right side, you can see a picture also of the purple line, which is the commuter rail that takes you, kind of like to the outer bounds of Boston, the suburbs and those other parts that I've mentioned before.
And if you see, the commuter rail is more of a traditional train, which
Hmm.
is, it's cool to know, right?
Yeah, and also reminding, the MBTA and the commuter rail are very, very different when you compare to the Amtrak. The Amtrak is a whole different thing that we can even talk about another day, but the Amtrak does federal transport, which means that it takes you on the railroads from state to state. And like I said, that's a completely different thing, but also very interesting.
Exactly. It's a different ballgame. But if you do want to go travel around the US, you want to go from Boston to New York, Boston to DC, Philadelphia, all around the East Coast, really, you're welcome to use the Amtrak. I'm not sure. I don't think there's Amtrak yet across the country, like to the West Coast,
Uh,
but I I'm pretty sure there isn't.
yeah,
I can check.
yeah, no, I was just thinking about it because I think that there might be, but it's not a straight line, right? I think usually people have to go to multiple locations in the United States to get from the East Coast to the West Coast, but it's definitely also a way longer travel. I know that some people are adventurous enough to do that. I wouldn't, but I think now it's possible to travel from the east to the west. But honestly, having in mind that the current flight prices, it's much more worth getting just a plane.
Yeah, that is true. I actually found an image of the sorry, I found an image of the Amtrak railroad route. I would love to share it. Give me one second.
Yeah.
But it's interesting,
Hmm.
let me see if I can share
Yeah, that would be
the
cool.
image there.
But it's so interesting. And also, I know, like, in my first year living here in the United States, I actually lived in California, and one of the most beautiful Amtrak railroads actually goes in the West Coast because you can see the mountains. I think it goes from the north of the West Coast into the south, and it goes on the coast of the West Coast. Really, really
Exactly.
beautiful. Definitely worth checking out. You have a map here, so
Yeah,
let's
so
see it.
here's the map. You can see um the that you're totally right. It does take you across the country. It doesn't necessarily take you directly to the West Coast from Boston, but if you take, for example, Boston is right here, right? You can get, I've taken
Hmm.
it to Washington. It's pretty quick. I'm
Hmm.
sure that if you take it to Washington and you take like different routes to
Hmm.
Chicago and then all the way down to
Yeah,
LA or something like
and you
that.
can see that if you
um
go from LA to San Diego, it's all over the coast of California, right? So that's really, really beautiful.
yeah, it must be gorgeous, V. You're
Yeah,
totally right.
it's amazing. Yeah.
um but yeah, but that is the Amtrak, and that is a place that
Hmm.
is, it's good to keep in mind whenever you guys want to travel, you know, around all of the United States. But also keep in mind that there's also flights. But
Yes.
yes, so that is about what the public transportation is in terms of cars. It depends. I personally think that if you're living in the city, it doesn't make a difference to have a car. It actually is more, it's more costful to have a
Hmm.
car.
Very
It's
true.
more expensive because within Boston, Boston is made as a walking city. So if you're an international student just getting to Boston, you'll quickly find out that you can walk anywhere here, from all the way from the airport all the way to BU, or the Museum of Fine Arts. Like you can walk all over Boston pretty much in an hour. So cars don't work here because there is no parking space. That is the
Yeah.
truth. There's no parking space within the city. So it's better always to move with public transportation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that like unless you live outside of the city, you really don't need to have a car. If you live in Everett, if you live in Chelsea, if you live in Somerville, you really don't need a car. You'd be near public transportation, and that would save you a lot of time and money. But if you do have a car, and you are driving to the city pretty often, I would definitely recommend you to download an app that can help you finding parking spots because
True.
it's hard to find parking in the city, so you gotta leverage from as many resources as you can.
Or, or even finding some form of parking spot that even if you have to pay it, try to get like a monthly pass to pay that parking spot, some form of program to pay it on the long term because it's going to save you a lot of time. You're not going to have to look for it when you come to work or come to study. And you're not going to have to, you're going to save a bit of money too on that. So that's pretty
Hmm.
good. But as V said, if you live away, like not within the city or close to the city, and you're coming into the city for work, it's always good to have a car because, yes, the subway lines, the MBTA, tends sometimes to delay itself and take some time. So it is recommended that if you live genuinely like far away from the city, to have a car. It always
Exactly.
works out.
Yep. Totally agree.
So yeah, that's pretty much the public transportation of Boston. In terms of culture, it's very chill
Yeah.
to be quite. It's a very tranquil transportation. It
Yeah.
doesn't you don't need to be worried about someone, mugging you or you don't you don't need to worry about danger. It tends to be very safe for students. So it's very good to use if you're a student, and you're going to save a lot of money with this. But at the same time, it's good to know that the public transportation of Boston closes pretty early at 12:30 a.m. No more subways come out, and you sometimes can get trapped if you're going out at night, So
Yeah.
definitely keep that in mind. So if
Yeah.
you're going somewhere on the T and you need to get back home later than 12:30 a.m., make sure to know that you're gonna have to take some form of Uber or take a ride with
Yeah.
get a ride with someone because that's what happens. It
Yeah.
closes.
Definitely get well prepared. Know your grounds well. Know where you're going, and like Donna said, you don't really need to worry. It's pretty safe. But as you know, Boston is a big city, so you always want to be sure that you're going to the places and that you're not putting yourself in any undesired situations, right? But
Exactly.
Donna, can I
Exactly.
can I add one last fun fact before we leave, just to give people.
Please do. Please do,
So,
V.
when the Boston public transportation was being built, it actually started in Park Street with the Green Line. Like you said, it's the oldest public transportation system in the United States. And back then in history in the United States, a lot of people used to be hanged in the Park Street in the downtown
Right.
area, and there were a lot of revolutions, a lot of fights, and a lot of violence, and of course a lot of people died, and a lot of bodies were actually they put a lot of bodies in that area, like they dug a lot of bodies in there, and there were a lot of graves in Park Street. So when they started building the Green Line, they had to remove so many bones, they had to remove
Oh
so
my
many
God.
bodies that were from back in history, and I thought that was fascinating because that's history, and I found
That
that I
is
was like,
history.
yeah, it's so interesting because like it's if it goes way back, it goes way back, and it brings so many different things from the times that the United States was just a country in development, a republic in development. So I would say this Green Line actually, has a lot more than a lot of people can think, and it's definitely worth finding out more and researching and learning about it. If you're coming to
I
Boston,
agree.
yeah, and if you're coming to Boston becoming a student, it's good to get to know the history.
That is true. It is very interesting to know that on your way to college, on your way to work, you're traveling through roads that so many people traveled before. You're stepping on on what other people have created for you, right? Through years and years
Hmm.
and years of work. So
Yeah.
that is amazing to think of. It really is the story of the evolution of humanity, right?
Yeah, pretty much, pretty much.
So
All
I love
right.
that. I think that's really cool. But yes, that's it for today, guys. Thank you everybody for tuning in to Approaching Your Future with your host Dana Khan and Victor Ribeiro, where we discuss different cultural aspects of life in the United States. So
Yes.
we will be back next Friday at 2 p.m. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so that you get all of the updates from YouTube for us. And make sure to follow us on Instagram at approach_USA to keep up with the latest updates of all our free resources, which we would love to have you guys be part of.
Exactly. And if you are a student or if you're not a student, just make sure to take full advantage of all our free resources, such as free English conversation classes, blog posts, Instagram lives with grammar tips, as well as, you know, our team of admissions. We do lives every Wednesdays to give you advice on your paperwork, on questions on how to apply to our school and how to come study in Boston, right?
Exactly, exactly. And also tune in on Mondays. We have a live stream on Instagram about cultural tips in the United States. It's kind of like this podcast, but a bit more toned down. So we just talk about it in a few minutes. But we have incredible topics that we would love to have you guys come and ask questions. So by all means, tune in.
Yeah, tune in and we'll see you again next week.
See you next week, guys. Thank you.
See you all. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your Friday and enjoy the weekend. Bye, Danita. Thank you so much.
Bye, Victor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.